Welcome to the Straight Red Card, and as part of our continuing preview for the MLS season, today we have with us Michael Orr. He is the host of Miles Football Show on Cascadia FM. Michael, thanks for joining us to talk about the Portland Timbers.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be kind of exciting, obviously, because this is you guys are just busting into the league here, and there's so many question marks when that happens. So I'll just let you start here and give us sort of a preview. There are so many new faces, and then there are a lot of faces you will know from last season who are still on the team. Can you give us sort of a preview of the key players and some of the major signings you guys have had?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, well, the Timbers, as many people know, have been around in this current form since 2001, and so there sort of has been a 10-year build-up to this point. And with MLS coming so soon now, the Timbers have indeed kept a hold of, or I suppose they ended up re-signing 8 players from last year's team so far, of the second division team. And then just last week, they actually signed 2 players from the under-23 team from last year. That would be Freddie Braun and Jake Gleason, who's a young Kiwi international goalkeeper. So
right.
There are familiar faces, and guys like Ryan Poor, Khalif Al-Hassan, Footy Danso, guys that we were pretty familiar with last year. And so I think that'll help with people who have been fans. That said, the bigger name signings, I think, have been non-Division II players who have moved up. So Kenny Cooper is by far the biggest name acquisition that the Timbers have made.
Right.
They signed him away from 1860 Munich and picked up a few guys in the expansion draft, made some controversial trades as well. We drafted Dax McCarty and then traded him to DC United. And that brought Rodney Wallace back in return, who's a young left back.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of good pieces to this team, and most of them are pretty young. And those who aren't are kind of looking for a second chance or a way to sort of bring their name back into repute. A guy like Troy Perkins, a goalkeeper, he kind of had a rough year last year.
Right.
And he's going to be looking to perform at a high level again. So I think the team is made up of a lot of guys who are going to be very highly motivated.
Right.
So that's sort of the shell of the team at this point. We actually are still, whereas most clubs in the league are rounding out they're trying to figure out what the starting 11 is going to be. The Timbers still don't have a full roster,
right,
and are still trying guys out. Have a few trialists, some of whom were even more players from last year, some of whom are international players. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to see the rounding out of the full roster.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say, with Kenny Cooper not playing much for near a year now, what's realistically? What do you expect of like goal production as far as he goes? Like, would you expect like a double-digit year or anything along those lines?
I think that I don't know that double digits is something that he's even going to necessarily aspire to. I think if it happens, that would be great. But just in some of the few practices I've been able to see so far, he's really combined well with Darlington Nagbe, who was the top draft pick for the Timbers and the National Player of the Year in college last year.
Yeah.
Nagbe plays really a withdrawn role, and Cooper is obviously a big man up front. But I think that the interaction between those two guys is going to result in a lot of goals, but I'm not necessarily sure who is going to actually put the ball in the net every time. It may be pretty even between the two of them. So he's got a lot more skills than just being a big burly guy who smashes it into the net. So I really wouldn't be surprised to see him as a really potent offensive force, but not necessarily the only go-to guy for goal scoring. But, if he scored more than 10 goals, we'd all be happy with that as well.
Right.
It's interesting you mentioned Nagbe's play-off, basically a supporter role play-off of Cooper, whereas Cooper's has not really been more of a, I guess you would call it a target striker over the years. He has the body and the frame for it, but he's been more of a, I don't know what you'd really classify him as, but he uses his skill and what little speed he has. But he is a talented striker. He has a nose for the goal. But I mean, I hope he pans out. I really do. I hope he gets his feet back on the ground because I want the best for him. He has the talent and skill.
I think that he really feels comfortable and confident and relatively healthy for the first time in a long time. At least he's saying that so far, and that's good. And from what little I've seen, he's been out there running around with no problem and getting to know his new teammates. So I think that he's going to do really well, and I think because he did go away from MLS and really didn't perform very much, again, partly due to injury, I think he's going to be another guy, like I mentioned, that's really going to want to make people aware of his presence upon returning to the league.
And, and that was kind of the word when he was at 1860 and Plymouth Argyle, that he was kind of struggling with those injuries. And at the same time, there are three guys that kind of stand out to me because they're young guys who are all American. You have Nagbe, as we've been talking about, could be a major star, of course. You have a guy like Sal Zizzo, who was over at Hanover, was loaned out to Dusseldorf, didn't quite work out, but seems like he played 10 games for Chivas USA last year. Maybe he's kind of coming into his own. And then you have Bright.
The downside for Dike is that he actually injured his Achilles and is actually going to be out for most of the year. He did that in the first preseason game against Ventura County Fusion. So that's one thing actually the Timbers have been looking for is, they had him in place, and they brought Eddie Johnson up from Austin from the second division. They've got, Cooper and Nagbe. They've got a couple guys on trial. So that's something they're really looking for is another forward to sort of play with those guys. But yeah, Nagbe is really encouraging. I think everybody here is really excited about the potential that he brings. And having had a second division team for 10 years, you just don't get players with that much raw talent coming through very often. If they have it, they've usually been picked up or get picked up right away and taken out. So to have that kind of talent level, I think he'll have some adjusting to do, but his promise is high. Zizzo is a guy that they just picked up last week, and we're still trying to learn a little bit about him, but he came into Chivas last year in a weighted lottery. So I think the only reason he played just 10 games is because he only came in partway through the season.
I probably... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, so I think he's kind of on the mend as well. He had some injuries, and that derailed his time at Hanover. So, again, it's just guys who are looking to kind of get back into the first team action, and I think the competition for starting 11 is going to bring out the best in a lot of these guys.
One of the guys that I was looking at, because he was for a time on the Colombia national team, yet he's still sort of in that trial stage with you guys, is Jorge Perlaza, and he's only 25 years old. What are the outlooks of maybe him kind of breaking through and starting for this team?
Well, he's a guy that the club really wants to sign, and is in advanced negotiations with his club. He has. I'm not even going to try to explain what his contract situation is in Colombia, but it basically involves two contracts overlapping with the same club, and not wanting to be in either one. He wants to join the Timbers. So that's a guy. He's sort of a trialist plus. They've been aware of him for a long time, and it's just a matter of working out the details. So they believe in him to a very high degree, and to that end, he's been in camp both in California and now down in Arizona, and he assisted on the first goal that the Timbers had in the first preseason game. And I think that I think he's a guy that will start if his contract situation is able to be worked out. And I really think that it's my personal opinion that there's going to be a triangle up front with Cooper and Perlaza and then Nagbe sort of withdrawn behind, whether that's at the point of a midfield or as three forwards. I'm not sure it even necessarily matters. So he's definitely a guy that they want to be in the starting lineup, and has been playing sort of with the first group, if you will, in the training games. So we'll see much more of him in person next weekend when we have the Cascadia Summit up in Portland, and in Seattle, and people actually get to see these guys in person. So far, all the training games have been out of state.